Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we've got a little bit of excavating work going on because we are actually installing automatic waterers for our horses. We've actually got to run this all the way down to the barn way down there. It's about 700-800 feet away, but we've got a pretty good start on it. So what we're installing are these Cobett automatic waterers. It gets heat from the ground, and as it fills in your container for your water, then all this insulation keeps it from freezing and stuff around the sides, plus it keeps all your pipes and everything from freezing. So the top portion of this water is 4 feet tall, and then you see the little add-on down here on the bottom, that's 36 inches. So we've got 5 feet of this thing below the ground, and then we've got 2 feet sticking up, and then we're going to put some gravel and stuff around it too for the horses to walk up to and kind of keep this area dry and keep the water drained back away from it. But as you can see, we've also split the fence line with it to where that we can water both pastures with this one water. So that way, no matter which pasture we have the horses in, they can access it from both sides. Plus, down here, we're going to have the same thing because we actually have 5 pastures here, and we're going to have one water for 2, and then on down here there'll be one water for the other 2, and then we'll have one up there by the barn for the last pasture and the barn area. So we decided to go with the Cobett so that we didn't have to run electricity or anything out here to heat these waters. So we thought that this would be the best plan. So even though we are running a water line, we at least get to save the expense of running electric wire 700 or 800 feet. So as you know, to run electric wire, you'd have to run pretty heavy wire to get it out this far and keep your current and your wattage, your voltage and everything up where it needs to be. So that's why we ended up choosing these. They're supposed to use the heat from the ground to keep these things thawed out. And also as the heat from the ground comes up through the tubing, then the heat actually comes up into this insulated portion, and that's also what helps keep the water from freezing up in here. So all your valves and stuff are mounted inside this insulated portion. Hopefully we can get these things installed. This is actually the first time doing this. We did hire an excavating company to come out and dig the trenches and do all this stuff and get this stuff set in here. So it's kind of a learning experience for us. I believe, you know, he's actually kind of studied on it. He actually done a set of these for someone else just a few weeks ago. So it's kind of fresh with him of how to set these up and install them and everything. So hopefully things will go smooth. We don't hit too many big rocks. We have had a few rocks that he's been digging through right now, and he's been able to get them, you know, pulled up and moved out of the way. But I'm a little worried about this area and running into a rock we can't get through or something. So we'll just kind of have to play that one by ear. We may have to go around one or something if need be. He's using a 12-inch bucket here in order to dig the trench for the water line. The 12-inch bucket works pretty good, but where it is so narrow, this clay soil, he has a lot of trouble with it sticking inside the bucket. So which is why that he is shaking it so much, you know, like whenever he brings it out of the hole. In order to get that to let go of the bucket, he has to shake that. So it takes a little bit more time to dig it with the 12-inch bucket, but you get a lot nicer ditch instead of having to dig with a 24-inch bucket or something like that. Right here's the end of our first section. This is a 500-foot roll of water line. And as you can see, this right here is the very end of it. And I decided to go ahead and end it right here. Our water was going to be down here just a little bit farther, and I decided to go ahead and move it back so we didn't have to splice in a piece of water line, and we could pretty much use the line or cut the line here and put our fittings in for to be able to go to our water, because we're going to put a T in it right here. But if we'd have moved it on down to the other end, we would have had to put a connector on it and connected two pieces together. Throughout the entire time that he's been digging this ditch, I've been going along with the tape measure and just making sure we're at the correct depth. So we have to be at least 30 inches on our depth to comply with the state regulations. So I've just been going through and making sure that we're staying at 30 inches, and if it goes at 31 or whatever, that's fine as long as it's at 30 inches. So we got 500 feet of water line covered up. So we have the second water in the ground, and we had to dig this hole. It's 58 inches down to the very bottom, and then we've got 24 inches of the water sticking up above the ground, and we're going to put 6 to 8 inches of gravel around this. That way, as the animals walk up to drink, they are walking up to dry surface and stuff that can be repaired also, because if the horses and animals would just come up here to drink from this and it was just dirt around it, it would just start sinking down and just be mud all the time. So we're going to put that gravel and stuff around it and make it several inches deep so that they can come over here and drink from it and it doesn't affect the ground. And even if it does settle and push down, then we can just add a little bit more gravel to it. Our contractor decided that he would run this conduit through here to run the water line through as it goes into the water, which is actually a pretty good idea, because as you run that water line through, he's got an elbow on it as it goes into there, and it actually angles it and brings it right up the middle of the water, so it's easy to feed that water line in there. This is the third waterer right here, and he's got his 2-foot bucket on here for digging the holes for the waters, because the waters are actually, I believe, about 30 inches in diameter. So he was just digging the hole just enough to kind of have enough room to set the water in there and, be able to climb down in there and work on the hole and be in it. So it's not much bigger than the water itself. That way there's not nearly as much fill have to go back in, and not as much ground is disturbed around it. So really only taking the dirt that you need out so that you have less to put back in. I think this was a really good idea, but it also seemed to pose for a little bit of problem, because whenever you're packing the dirt back around it and trying to get it settled in, when we were set the waters in the ground, it made it harder to pack the dirt back in there tight, so it could cause a little bit more settling around the water itself. So this is the bottom portion of the water set down inside the hole. As you can see, basically you've got a square hole and it's sitting flat down on the bottom. Now there will be more room around it whenever we dig the line for the water line, but the main thing is getting the hole down, getting it deep enough, and then he will trench for the water line coming into it out the side. So as you can see here, we've got the top portion of it set on, and everything was leveled up good with it, and now he's digging the trench for the water line, and that way you can kind of get an idea of where he needs to dig to and the depth down to get the water line and everything in. Now he did have to dig deep enough with the water line coming in to get down to the bottom of the automatic waterer. And like I was saying, that hole is about 5 feet deep, and so he did have to dig that, but he digs it up to that 30-inch depth that the water line has to be, and just does a gradual slope up to that point. So here you can pretty much see the trench from the day before that is already covered up because we went ahead and put the water line in the trench and ran it out to the waters. He stopped digging there at the fence line pretty much the day before, but he covered everything back up as we ran the line down. And so the next morning he come in and started trenching for the remainder of the line. That way he didn't have all that stuff uncovered while nobody was around, and if the animals got out there, then they weren't falling in that ditch. So everything was covered up whenever nobody was around. This portion of the water line comes up and will connect into the existing water line that feeds the barn. So this line is coming up, and to the left is where the water is at, and then directly under the excavator still, it's hard to see here, but there's actually the main water line coming through, and he's digging to that, and he's going to put a T there and then branch it off for the line to the waters, and also put a shut off there for the waters so that if something would happen to the waters, we can shut them off separate and still leave water going to the barn. You can see here the water there to the left, and then you can see the pipe sticking up out of the ground with the manhole cover sitting on it. That's actually where the shutoff is. So just to the right of it is the main line, and we teed into that and then ran it over a couple feet to that meter and then put a shutoff there, and that way we can shut that line off to the waters completely separate from the barn. So if we ever have to work on the lines for the waters, then we don't have to shut the water off to the barn and still have running water there. I thought this was a pretty good idea for him to put that shut off there and put that manhole, because then you can just go over there and pull the cover off, reach down in the hole and turn the shut off and shut the water off. It works really good. These are the tees that were being used. Each one of these tees was put in at a waterer. So we had the main line going, and then we'd have the one that branched off and that would go to the water to feed it. So that's going to wrap it up for today's video. This is part one, and this was pretty much over a period of a couple days of digging. I believe it ended up being 719 feet of water line, and then putting the 3 waterers in and then getting them covered back up. Part 2 is actually going to be doing the plumbing and everything for these waterers. So stay tuned, and we'll see you on the next one.